Okay, our next example says negative 2x squared is less than or equal to 4. Negative 2x squared is less than or equal to 4. And again, just like in our last example, the first thing we want to do is move our 4 to the left. This will now say negative 2x squared minus 4 is less than or equal to 0. Again, back in algebra, we learned a factoring technique which was saying the first thing you do when you're factoring binomials or trinomials, you want to factor out what we call the greatest common factor if we have one. And in this case, we do. There is a greatest common factor here between negative 2x squared and minus 4. That would be negative 2. If I factor that out, I'm left with x squared plus 2 is less than or equal to 0. This is so because whenever you factor anything out, you want to make sure that you can go back and use your distributive property and get back what you started with. So if I take a negative 2 and multiply times a positive x squared, I do get back negative 2x squared. And likewise, negative 2 times positive 2 gives me negative 4. And so again, we're at a point now to where we have to actually go and locate our test points on the real line. So we take x squared plus 2, set this equal to 0 and solve. This says that x squared is equal to negative 2, and immediately once we take the square root of both sides, because we restrict ourselves to the real number line, there are no two identical numbers for x that when I multiply them together, it gets me a negative 2. So if we were actually doing this on a complex plane, we all know that we can actually take the square root of negative numbers, but since we're restricted to the real line, there are no values of x here that will work. So this one is no solution.